business, allowed it to be scalable and flexible, and lastly, it removes the complexity of running multi-systems. Cecilia.
Thank you, Terence. Let's start with the financial transaction processing industry's breakdown. Ventive ranks the 8th in terms of revenue, while in terms of transaction volume, Ventive ranks the 2nd, while First Data ranks the 1st. Here is the demand drivers for this industry. First is unemployment rate. It's declining since 2010, reaching 4.8% in January 2017, and the forecasted rate in the following month of 2017 will be also around 4.7%. Second is U.S. consumer spending. It increased at a stable rate at 2.7% annually, and the forecasted growth rate by 2020 will also be around 2.1% annually. Third is online shopping frequency. On the right side, the percentage of people shopping more than once a month is increasing, while on the left side, the percentage of people shopping less than once a month is decreasing. Fourth is increased card usage. The value of non-cash payments in U.S. in 2016 reaches $33 trillion. And the percentage of non-cash payment transactions by 2026 will have increased from 63% to 76%. Last is key clients development. Here are some of those key clients for this industry. Ventive will charge transaction fees per transaction. So thus, if Ventive can generate more revenue if those key clients develop better in the future. Here is the competitive positioning and potential threats for Ventive. Let's start with Visa and MasterCard. These two companies actually operate in two different segments with Ventive, and they haven't even touched what Ventive is doing right now. Then, same thing with Google and Apple. These two companies are players with big names and good reputation. However, this industry has a bunch of entry barriers, and Google and Apple is more focused on R&D, but not on this payment processing industry field. Thus, we think it's really hard for them to enter this industry field in the near future. Then it's PayPal and First Data. Ventive most focuses on small and medium-sized businesses. In the short term, Ventive's efficient operating infrastructure and the strategic model can give it an advantage. In the long term, First Data is a global company, but Ventive mainly operates in North America. However, Ventive has an amazing comprehensive platform among its peers. In the latest Forrester report, it gave Ventive 5 out of 5 under the term of development integration. Thus, we think Ventive can make great use of this highly integrated platform to help it stand out in the long term. Daniel?
Thank you, Cecilia. Ventive's growth strategy has resulted in a 23.5% compounded annual growth rate for its merchant services and a 3.5% compounded annual growth rate for its financial services. Naturally, the merchant service has been a more lucrative segment of their business model due to the tendency of many large financial institutions to perform their payment processing needs in-house. The merchant service accounts for roughly 85% of Vantive's revenue, processing over 20 billion transactions across 800,000 locations. Looking at the slowdown in revenue that has occurred over the past year, this is due in large part to their loss of Capital One as a customer and the price compression that has occurred from the renewal of their Fifth Third Bank contract. A large portion of Vantive's top-line growth is the result of their growth in transaction volume, with the merchant services growing at a compounded annual growth rate of 15.2% and the financial institutions growing at 3.9%. Currently operating in 10 of the top 25 national retailers, Vantive continues to show impressive growth in their merchant services, consistently acquiring new customers, such as Papa John's in 2016. To supplement the growth in transaction volume, Vantive has also been able to grow revenue per transaction, with the financial institution services growing at roughly 4% and merchant services growing at 5%, largely due to their consistent penetration of small and medium-sized businesses who offer more attractive margins. Although their credit rating is currently non-investment grade, Vantive has still been able to consistently access the debt capital markets on favorable terms to help facilitate their acquisitions. The 87% increase of debt outstanding in 2014 was due in large part to their acquisition of Mercury Payment System, their largest acquisition to date. With adjusted EBITDA margins consistently around 50%, Vantive produces a large amount of free cash flow that can be used to help service this debt. Even with a significant increase in debt outstanding compared to their IPO, Vantive has been able to improve their credit rating from BEA3 to BEA2. Report.
Thank you, Daniel. So we use two methods to value the Vantive stock price: discounted cash flow approach and relative valuation approach. In our discounted cash flow approach, we also use Monte Carlo simulation and sensitivity analysis to come up with a better estimate through simulation and to see the sensitivity of Vantive stock price. In our second relative valuation approach, we use the data for 6 peer firms and use two-way broad-based multiples, EV multiples and market multiples, to come up with a range of values for Vantive share price. Moving on to our first model, which is the discounted cash flow approach. So we begin by talking about the assumptions. Since Vantive has in past grown at a compounded annual growth rate of 18% in revenues and 16% in operating income, we decided to approach the model in 3 different scenarios: best case, base case, and worst case, where base case represents the current situation of the industry and the company. Our WACC stands at 6.5%, and here is the output of our DCF model. The value per share is at $71.40. Next, we use simulation to understand the impact of each of the input variables on the share price of Vantive and to come up with a better estimate through simulation. As can be seen from the tornado chart, cost of goods sold and selling general and administration have the highest impact of Vantive stock price. This makes sense, knowing that payments industry is a scale business. We then ran 1 million trials of Monte Carlo simulation, sampling from the distribution of each of the input variables to get a mean of $71.1 and median or 50th percentile at $71.29. Moving on to our second method of valuation, the relative valuation approach. Here we have enterprise value multiples. So basically we started with 6 peer firms, took their data from their 10K and then did the relative valuation, taking EV upon EBITDA as the most appropriate measure, knowing that EBITDA is a close proxy of operating income and operating cash flow. Vantive stock price would be $76 using the median and $84.01 using the mean. Yes?
Thank you, Barb. So again, we would like to reiterate our buy rating on shares of Vantive. While we do have some concerns, such as declining revenue growth and pricing compression within the industry, we believe that Vantive's merits, such as its acquisition strategy, its industry-leading EBITDA margins, the integrated payments platform, and the merchant side growth will continue to drive value into the future and present a good opportunity on shares of Vantive. Thank you, and we're happy to take your questions.
I may have missed this, but how did you split the DCF versus the relative value? Were they equally weighted? And then also, how did you come to that decision?
Yeah, so we use relative valuation to come up with a ballpark number. So we did not. So relative valuation is based on the comparable firms where we price it. And it was giving us a higher estimate of the number. So we got $76.84 as the share price. So we decided to stick with DCF model, and we use relative valuation to compare and see if our estimate is right or not. The benefit with DCF model is we can actually see how assumptions play into or fundamental values play into the valuation.
So your target price is then all DCF model?
Yes.
Okay.
And just to add on, we took the DCF because it was more conservative, and we're able, like you said, we're able to put in our assumptions and play with it to give different scenarios. So that's why we're doing this DCF.
Can you describe the different share classes, their economic split, and their voting rights?
Can I touch the computer? So when Vantive went public, it issued, first of all, before they went public, it was owned by Advent, sorry about that. And then Advent had 18% voting rights and 21.3% voting right. Then it went on to give 4.4 voting right to directors and executives, and 57.3 voting rights to the public, and 70% voting right to the public. Currently, Fifth Third still owns 18.5% voting rights to it. So it's broken down between Fifth Third Bank, the public, and its current board of directors.
You had a slide with a host of different large box retailers. I'm wondering, with the consolidation that's taken place, Limited we've heard recently, and many others to follow, I'm sure. What's the dependency of merchant services in terms of number of stores that are out there in general?
Yeah, because actually Vantive starts with the big clients, as shown in this chart. It's like they see Walmart and so many big supermarkets, but these days it's just starting to seek opportunities, new opportunities based on the small and medium-sized businesses. So actually, Vantive, according to Vantive's latest earnings call, its merchant size grows at 14% this past quarter, and 13% just comes from the transactions, like the number of transactions increase, and 1% comes from the transaction revenue per transaction. That's kind of, they are seeking to develop more business retailers based on the small and medium-sized businesses. So they're actually expanding their business in merchant size.
What was the reason for loss of Capital One account?
I believe in the company presentation we attended, one of the reasons why Capital One went ahead, because Capital One was developing some payment processing segment for itself.
Gotcha. So are you guys worried that the 4 big accounts that they have, they might lose those?
4 big accounts on the financial side or the?
I'm looking at this slide where we have Target, Kroger's, Walmart, and Macy's.
Sorry, could you repeat your question?
So it looks like they're heavily dependent on their key client. So if those key clients were to drop off, when are these contracts coming up for renewal?
Yeah, I got your question. Because actually these 4 clients are like big merchant size. So actually Vantive will charge transaction fees per transaction. But for these big clients, they will charge less transaction fees per transaction compared with small and medium-sized businesses. So actually there is just a transition from these big clients to mostly focuses on small and medium-sized businesses because of the price compression and the competition from First Data in this. And actually, they just acquired a Canadian company called Moneris last December. So Moneris is actually doing the healthcare vertical service in U.S. branch. So actually, they're just switching to different customers in this merchant size.
And just to add on to that, although those are the main customers, Vantive operates like in this supermarket segment, pharmacy segment, retailer segment, restaurant, as well as financial institution segment. And like you said, the issue with these big clients is that they can negotiate contracts where certain prices and fees which Vantive can make is compressed. So that's why Vantive is going after small and medium-sized businesses.
Gotcha. Thank you.
What's the sensitivity to where we are in the business cycle, given your DCF time horizon? Where are we in that cycle, and how does that play into the DCF model?
So if we look at the beta of the company, it's like 0.84, something like that. So the reason is basically Vantive's a lot of business comes from basically the supermarket, groceries, so which would still be, which is not so cyclical as compared to the retail business like Macy's. So, and the Vantage focus is a lot on small and medium businesses. So we definitely see a huge growth potential for Vantive and less cyclical compared to the rest of the economy. The second.
You described different scenarios, the bull and bear case, and most likely. What would be the best case and what would be the worst case? How would you describe what went into, is it company metrics or is it environment or what?
So in the best case, we have assumed 15% compounded annual growth rate. So in the past, it has seen 18% compounded annual growth rate. So we assume that the company would still achieve 15% compounded annual growth rate. In our worst case, we assume 6% compounded annual growth rate in revenues. Here the assumption is the Vantive might lose some of its customers, but still would manage to grow at 6%. Because payment industry right now is more about scale, and Vantive has an upper hand in processing a transaction at the lowest possible cost. So, and that is why Vantive would continue to grow at 6%.
What are some of the terminal growth rates at your terminal period?
So our terminal period growth rate is 3.5% for the base case.
From a corporate governance standpoint, how active or inactive is Fifth Third, and how does that influence the broader long-term strategic initiatives that Vantive has in front of it?
So just recently, Fifth Third sold a portion of their stock, and it actually caused them to lose one of their board seats on the board. But I think that was their initiative. This was more of, they wanted to kind of guide Vantive as it spun off as its own, but eventually I believe the plan is for Vantive to kind of have independence and they kind of want to move away. So I think that's the direction as far as corporate governance goes.
What are the costs of the independent sales organization versus the direct sales?
Sorry, repeat the question.
The independent sales organizations versus direct sales, which one's more expensive to the company?
Definitely the independent sales organization, because then it's kind of like having contractors who go out and make sales for you. In comparison to going to directly interact with customer and negotiating these contracts, this on the other side, you have to pay these sales agents the fees, so this will be more expensive. But it's proven beneficial in the sense that, unlike First Data, whose goal for this year will be to acquire more small and medium-sized merchants, Vantive is already gaining the benefits of interacting with these merchants.
So if an independent sales organization is the face of the company, do you have less ability to retain that customer because maybe that independent sales organization is not as dedicated to you as a direct organization would be?
I think, so the way independent sales organizations work is they have basically contacts from the customer's end. So they don't do the things that now acquirer businesses would do, acquirer firms would do. So they are basically taking up these businesses. So I don't particularly feel there is a threat for Vantive. In fact, it helps Vantive to reach. So nowadays businesses are using ISOs to reach to the clients. So I think those are like the middle people. Definitely they would eat some of their businesses, but that they are not a threat. They would only help Vantives with this.
For questions?
I just want one more quick, I guess. You had the chart, I can't find it, with the price chart where the stock had outperformed. It seemed like it was kind of a recent phenomenon. What caused the stock to outperform the peer group?
Around